Good afternoon. We will begin the Calcasieu Parish public briefing for Hurricane Laura recovery efforts. I'm Brian Beam, Calcasieu Parish Administrator. We have some important things to cover today. We'll hear some regular updates, but we're going to keep those briefer because we want to focus on housing, specifically direct housing for our folks in Calcasieu Parish who may be participating in that program. But we do want to hear from some of the others. We'll start with Dick Grimion, our Parish Director of Emergency Preparedness. Dick?
Thank you, Brian. A couple of safety messages, or the main one today is a reminder about COVID. I'm wearing a mask, and we're still under the masking order for the state of Louisiana. I just want to remind you of that. But COVID is still in our midst, so wear your mask, maintain your social distance 6 feet or more away from other people. Wash your hands well, keep your hands washed, and sneeze into your or cough into your elbow if needed. Two other things. Our pod sites, I mentioned the other day that we'd be evaluating those. We'll have some information about that toward the end of the week, but now that the power is back on in most areas of the parish, we will probably be winding down some of those pod sites. We'll have further information for you at another briefing. And the last thing I want to emphasize, and you're going to hear every speaker who comes up here today emphasize this to you. Please sign up for your FEMA benefits if you have not done so already. All of the other aid that FEMA, we're going to talk about housing today. There may be some other topics. All of that keys on your initial application for FEMA benefits. So please make sure that you get that in. If you have troubles getting it online, they have a really good telephone helpline. I've used it myself and it actually works. So I would encourage you, just because you had trouble signing up over the internet, use that phone line. I think it works. And with that, I will turn it back over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Dick. We'd like to hear from law enforcement at the briefings, and today we have Stitch Gilry, Chief Deputy for the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office.
Thank you, Brian. Our numbers are pretty much the same as they've been. We haven't seen a large increase or a large decrease. They've stayed pretty steady. Last 24 hours, CPSO had 7 arrests, 1 for burglary, 1 for looting, unauthorized entry. We had a home invasion, weapons violation, aggravated assault. Our CPSO Corrections Division had a rebook transfer, a detainer that was being held for someone else. Lake Charles PD had 2 arrests, 1 curfew violation and a weapons violation. The state police had 2 arrests, aggravated flight, and a weapons violation. We've had a total of 176 stops last night. I want to remind people that the curfew is in effect from 10 to 6 a.m., 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. If you're out after 10 o'clock and you're on the roads and you're traveling and you're in neighborhoods, chances are you are going to be stopped. And I just want to say, for the most part, our citizens have done a wonderful job of cooperating with law enforcement, trying to protect people's property, and we're out there working hard every day. And I just want to thank the citizens for their cooperation and their help with us and law enforcement. That concludes my report. At this time, I'll have Colonel Raleigh with the Louisiana National Guard come up and give his report. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I was told a long time ago to be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. So I'm going to do that today. Currently, we still maintain the 15 pods throughout Calcasieu Parish. We have 29 security missions, both day and night. We're staging vehicles, boats, and everything in the event that we should have to rescue anybody. So the Guard is prepared to protect and serve the citizens of this parish. Any questions? Guard set.
was brief, very brief. We've said it a lot, but we're so appreciative, Colonel, of the Guard. Louisiana National Guard has been so important here, and their mission is winding down more, but it's still critical. From the utilities aspect, I think we heard from Entergy on Monday. At that time, I think they were 95% restored. It's a little higher. They're down really to those areas that are a little more maybe trouble with some of the connections. So there's not a report from them today that's different. Beauregard Electric still about 60% of their customers in Calcasieu have power, and they're still working the remaining customers in that area. So we'll go to the individual assistance update today. We want to hear from Red Cross, and Ed Bush is here on behalf of Red Cross.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. As always, my pleasure to be here this afternoon, and certainly the pleasure of the Red Cross to be part of this monumental effort. And I'll keep it brief as well this afternoon. So for the last few weeks, you've heard me stand up here and I've briefed you on our priorities and our focus. And we've talked sheltering and food specifically, and I'm happy to say that all of that is trending the right way. Today we have less rooms and less people in those rooms. And today in Calcasieu, we will only feed at 6 feeding locations. That's the smallest number ever. All that shows progress. We're moving in the right direction. I wanted to highlight that because all of that progress that we've made is a result of some truly great people doing some truly phenomenal things as part of these partnerships that we've formed. One of those partnerships that I wanted to talk about today was one of the first ones that we formed early on, that partnership with DCFS, the Department of Child and Family Services. There is no way that we could have tackled this hotel shelter, this non-congregate shelter challenge. There's no way we could have done that and been able to provide that care to these people without that partnership. So at this point, I'd like to call Ricky Monte, who's the Director of Emergency Preparedness for DCFS, to come on up and have a few words. Ricky?
Yes. Yeah, and thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. And thank the parish and the city for the invite. Ed hit right on spot. Just like he said, he couldn't do it without us. We couldn't have done it without Red Cross. Red Cross has been a great partner, and we always had a great working relationship with Dick Remio and the parish here in Lake Charles. So we very much appreciate the opportunity to serve the residents of the parish, and we're going to continue to until we need to. Thank you.
So now as we move forward, and we'll hear some additional conversation on housing, and we'll expand our partnerships, and clearly FEMA, we are partnered with you. And I think the big takeaway for everyone who's watching this today is it's through that partnership, that net, that's how we make sure that no one falls through the cracks. And we'll be there to provide that care that you've come to expect of us as we move forward. And certainly be challenging times, but there's a lot of good people on this. So thank you. That concludes my brief. Unless there's any questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you both. We appreciate Red Cross and DCFS, key players in this whole effort. As we get into the housing item, I'll just mention this is primarily going to be FEMA, and you're going to hear from them. But the local government has a role, state government has a role, and federal through FEMA. We'll try to piece that together. One of the things, though, that a lot of people don't understand, we have to make a request to get this type of assistance that goes through the state first, who then has to request it through FEMA. So the state is a key player, and we appreciate that. They're a little more behind the scenes in some of these, but they can't hide today because we have Ruby Douglas today. Seriously, Ruby is the section chief for emergency preparedness for GOSEP. When you hear GOSEP, that's an acronym. It's Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, which is a long title, but we appreciate Ruby being here today, and she can lay out their role. And then after she's done, I think she'll introduce the folks from FEMA who will give an overview of the program. So Ruby, come on up.
All right, thank you so much for having us come here. And I just want to say that, you know, you've heard about partnerships and collaborative partnerships, but I'll just tell you, usually when everything goes and falls apart, you either have people pointing the finger or giving the finger. That's usually what happens. But I'll just tell you, I'm here today to tell you that you have probably the best local leadership through local leadership, partnerships with the state leaders, as well as our federal partners. I can't tell you how proud we are to expedite some of the things behind the scenes to make sure that people get what they need. Our focus is really survivor-centered and making sure people have things that they need. Also, I'll just tell you, it's very important that we also know that this recovery is going to be a long process, but we are all here in it together. I'll just tell you, some of your citizens have already, as you heard Dick say, please register for FEMA. Go to disasterassistance.gov because it's important for you to get that application started. Our partners with FEMA, using different partnerships with preliminary damage assessment, have already expedited those applications. It has been amazing what we've used technology to put data together to expedite certain things. And so our FEMA partners are here today, and they're working with your local leadership. In fact, we have actually engaged them so much that they're looking at sites specific for your communities because they know what's best in their backyards. So I'm going to go ahead and defer it to our Jerry Stoller here with FEMA so he can get to the guts of things and tell us about direct assistance, direct housing assistance. Jerry?
Thank you, Ruby. Administrator Beam, thank you for having us here. There has been, you've heard last several times we've met in this setting about the progress that's been made, and certainly there has been an awful lot of progress in terms of restoring a number of the essential government functions here in Calcasieu Parish. But it is certainly not lost on all of us, the tens of thousands of residents of this parish who are really going through a challenging time right now. And I just want to assure all of you that are watching this that, on behalf of all the other federal employees that are working here in Louisiana, that our thoughts and prayers are with you during this challenging time. And we're going to do everything we can, all right, to get you back home in a safe and a secure environment. We know that many of you right now are staying with friends, family members, or living in hotels because your homes are just not safe to be in right now. Laura was certainly a catastrophic event. It was a historic event for not only the state of Louisiana, but for this entire country. And again, as you've heard other speakers say, that this recovery will be long, and it's going to require the teamwork from a lot of different agencies, volunteer organizations, and other philanthropic entities here in Calcasieu Parish. I just want to share with you a couple of numbers that, as of today, more than 84,000 residents of Calcasieu Parish have registered for federal assistance. And I like to put that number in even a little bit of perspective. That number represents more than 95% of the households in Calcasieu Parish. So that number alone, I think, speaks to just how catastrophic Hurricane Laura was to this parish. Now, as a result of these registrations, FEMA has put more than $91 million in the hands of survivors of Calcasieu Parish. This total includes $59 million for housing assistance and $32 million in other needs assistance. And we are working very closely with our partners both at the state and local level to determine the best housing solution for those who have damaged homes. We realize that there is an extreme shortage of affordable rental housing units in Calcasieu Parish. Realizing this need, the state, submitted, Governor Edwards did submit, and it was approved, a direct housing, a temporary direct housing program for those heavily affected by this storm. Not only is direct housing available, but also rental assistance and the possibility of multifamily lease and repair to apartments or units of that type will also be available to survivors of this storm. Now, as we work through these various housing options, it's very important that if you're currently staying in a hotel room that's been provided by the state and is being managed by the Red Cross and Department of Child and Family Services, that you continue to take advantage of that hotel room until a longer-term solution is identified for you and that your permanent home is safe and habitable. Parish and city officials, many of whom you've heard in this setting over the last several weeks, are fully committed to working together to ensure that we get you back home just as quickly, but most importantly, as safely as possible. Again, the types of assistance that are available, and I already mentioned this, the rental assistance, which is financial assistance to eligible survivors who need a place to temporarily live. This, if you can't find an apartment, again, you can use that rental assistance to possibly rent an RV or a mobile home to get yourself closer to where your permanent home is. The state of Louisiana has also authorized two types of direct housing assistance. The first option will provide eligible households temporary use of a FEMA-issued travel trailer or mobile housing unit. The second option is where FEMA would pay for an eligible survivor to lease a FEMA-approved property. It's called our direct lease program. Now, our FEMA team has already started to call on these eligible households, right? Residents who have been displaced by Hurricane Laura, to determine which of these options will work best for them. FEMA determines the type of housing based on the size and needs of each household. And this includes any household member that has disabilities or other access or functional needs. FEMA has already started making these calls, and they will continue to make these calls 7 days a week. They make these calls either in the morning, the afternoon, or evening. They can schedule these with the household at whatever time is convenient for them. Now, at this point, I want to remind everyone that if you're interested in taking advantage of one of these housing options, if your cell phone number or where you are staying or living has changed since you registered for assistance, you must contact us to let us know where you're at and how we can reach you. And you can do that by calling 800-621-3362 to update this contact information. I want to remind everyone that if you do receive FEMA rental assistance, you will be required to provide a lease agreement and appropriate receipts in order to receive additional rental assistance for each successive month. And that can last up to a period of 18 months. Now, for the material solutions, those temporary housing units, we are currently moving trailers and preparing to transport manufactured housing units into Southwest Louisiana. We are working closely with parish officials to place travel trailers and mobile housing units in accordance with local floodplain regulations and in commercial parks and possibly on the lots of individual residences. But as you can tell by that, it's going to require a significant amount of coordination with local officials in order to make this happen. The bottom line here is that every household is unique, and so each household's recovery process will be different and may require a different period of time. Again, I want to remind everyone that the first step to recovery is to register with FEMA to be considered for temporary housing. You can do so by going to disasterassistance.gov. You can use the FEMA app, or you can call the FEMA helpline, and that number again is 800-621-3362. Determining the right housing option for you is a process that is going to take time. Everyone here today is continued to deliver safe housing to you as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We look forward to working with the state and local officials and with each and every one of you that are exploring the temporary housing option, and to work with you as you make your way through the recovery process. And with that, that'll conclude my update for today, subject to any questions.
First of all, the trailers that are on their way, when will they get here and where will they be? And the type of housing that you're talking about, do you envision a mobile home being put on someone's permanent property that they own? Or would this be, like 200 mobile homes on, a concrete slab somewhere?
Right. Okay, so I'll start with the first part of the question. The units are being moved into Louisiana even as we speak, okay, where you have a staging area up in Alexandria. That's where the units will be inspected once they get in the state to make sure that they are safe and that everything inside of them works. And then as far as the types of units, they come in various bedroom sizes based on the family composition. And the first priority, if it's possible, will be to try to get the unit installed on to an individual homeowner's site. But as you can well imagine, there are a lot of requirements that must be met in order for that to be possible. And of course, there are some local permitting and other regulations that we're going to have to work with the local officials on. The last part of your question, you talked about, several hundred units perhaps being on a concrete pad somewhere. That is an option, but that is the option of last resort, okay? If we can't get a unit onto an individual site, onto a private homeowner site, the next approach would be to look at available pads that are on commercial parks throughout the parish. And we've already begun to work closely with the parish and local officials to inspect a number of those properties. And I can say that we've identified several promising locations. We just need to finish the coordination that's required in order for us to actually use those sites.
So did you say that people will be contacted by FEMA, or do they have to do something at this point?
No, it'll begin with an actual outreach by a FEMA representative. It'll be a phone interview where they will be asked a series of questions about the extent of the damage to their home and their family composition and any special family needs that family might have. That's what will get the whole process started as far as identifying what type of solution they will be eligible for.
So is FEMA calling only those who were approved for assistance? Obviously, there are many people who were denied assistance who are not going to be able to find an apartment.
Right, and the households that we are calling right now are those who have registered and have been found eligible for housing assistance.
So is there any housing program that will cover the rest of the people who, there are many, many people being evicted from apartment complexes right now.
Right.
Is there any plan for those people?
Yeah, for those households that do not qualify for a FEMA temporary housing option, we're going to be working very closely with the parish and the local jurisdictions to explore through philanthropic and other volunteer organizations some options that will be available for those households. Okay.
Okay. And so the actual mobile homes, you would expect them to be moved as they are assigned to individuals?
If you're asking about a specific time frame, at this point, I'm not prepared to set a date certain on when that's going to begin, but what I can tell you is that we are building an inventory of housing solutions in the state right now. We are looking at commercial properties in the parish, and we do have some very promising leads on areas that we can use for commercial parks. The private sites, we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but the process is underway, okay? But I'm not prepared to put a date certain on when you'll actually see units here in the Calcasieu Parish area. Okay.
And I'm showing my age, but you know, when this happened because of Hurricane Rita, there were all these problems with regard to formaldehyde in these units. Has that been resolved?
Yes, the manufactured housing units that FEMA will have in Calcasieu Parish have been built to housing and urban development standards, and these are very good quality units in mobile homes that we've used, in fact, as recently as in 2016 for the flooding that occurred there.
Do you have an exact number on how, you said tens of thousands of people are not at home. Do you have any idea how many of them are in the Lake Charles area, or where they are, like an inventory of how many are in Texas, how many are in other states?
Right. Yeah, well, since we're still early in the call-out process to these households, I don't have that level of detail yet for Calcasieu Parish. Unlike the registrations where I'm able to give you specifics for Calcasieu Parish, it's just a little too early yet in the call-out process for me to give you that information. But in the next couple of weeks, I'll certainly I'll have a much better idea of what that looks like for Lake Charles and Calcasieu Parish in general. Okay. Thank you.
You said that. All right. You said that there were around 80,000 people who qualify for FEMA assistance. How many people do you plan to call about housing assistance? Of that number, will you be calling that many people?
Okay. Yeah. For that, I think I'm going to ask Liz to come on up and maybe talk. She does have access to a little more information about the number of households that we currently have being worked. Miss Liz Redfern is our individual assistance branch chief. She's joined me today. She works at our command center in Baton Rouge. Liz?
Thank you. So what happens is once a survivor actually registers, as we've been encouraging, one of the first things that we do once we realize they're not insured is actually do an inspection. Because of COVID-19, we're doing those inspections remotely, and then doing an additional kind of drive-by to make sure that we are properly identifying the homes that are destroyed or that have major damage and are not livable. That's really the criteria to get a direct housing referral, is major unlivable home or destroyed home. So far in Calcasieu Parish, we have identified just over 2,200 for homeowners. We expect that number to grow as more and more insurance information is submitted by those homeowners to show us that they are not fully covered. Since it is a wind event, we have to wait on that. We already have over 5,300 renters who are also falling into that same calculation, and the number being higher because by and large renters don't tend to have the same level of insurance coverage. So we've already started making the calls. I can tell you statewide, there's only just over 9,200 identified for potential within the 6 approved parishes for direct housing, just over 9,200 approved for direct housing as of this morning. And of those, as you can imagine, over 7,600 of those are here in Calcasieu Parish. So the bulk of the energy is going into Calcasieu because that's where the bulk of the work and the damage is at. As of last night, those initial call-outs to try and screen what those survivor housing needs are is, as Jerry very
clearly detailed a moment ago, to determine what is the housing size, what are the needs of those households in terms of bedrooms, and, you know, are there wheelchairs and walker requirements, things like that for ramps. We have done just right at 2,300 of those initial call outs to those, again, major and destroyed homes. The about 500, I would say, have identified already that they are not in need of a direct housing referral, that they've already come up with their own solution, that they prefer to stay in their home or they found some other option. A lot of them already own an RV, and that's where they're going to stay on their property, and they don't require FEMA assistance. We do tell them at the time of that phone call, if that situation doesn't work out, then they can call us back in order to reactivate that request for direct housing. Because I will tell you, as you might well imagine, some of them also are saying they can stay for a long time at a relative's home or a friend's home. That always sounds really good at the beginning, but that welcome can be worn out quite quickly. And so when that happens, they still have the option of calling us back because they have met the eligibility criteria. It's just that at the time of the conversation, they didn't feel that they had that need. Thus far, we've identified through subsequent follow-up. So basically, we have one call center that calls out and does the initial screening, and then when they come through, there's about 1,800 that we're working with now who didn't have something sustainable. Maybe they're in a hotel, maybe they're in some other more precarious location like their car. So the more precarious, we definitely are going to contact first versus somebody who is a little more in a little bit safer situation for the time being. But so far, we have identified 243, the bulk of whom are in Calcasieu Parish, that are stating that they really need for us to work with them closely and potentially come up with a referral option for them, be it a mobile home, a travel trailer. We don't see a lot of apartments here in Calcasieu Parish to be able to rent for survivors through our direct lease program, but should some come online, that can become an option. 92 of those are indicating that they are homeowners who would rather have a unit on their property if we can get the proper permitting and ensure that that property meets regulatory requirements as, for placement, and that, quite frankly, it will fit, that a unit would even fit. And then the balance, 151, already are on the list waiting for a unit to be placed in a commercial park. So it's kind of where we're at.
This might not be a question for you, but someone might have the answer of how this will affect reopening schools.
Okay.
To my knowledge, and I'm not going to speak for Carl Brookhouse, school superintendent, I don't think that's going to affect that. They are moving ahead with their own plan, which is, I think, a combination of some in-person, some virtual. But I don't believe any of these arrangements, which are between FEMA and that individual or that family, would change any overall school plans. Now, it may for those particular people, which I think each school and their administration would deal with individually.
And how much of a priority is it right now to get people back close to where they live?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? You mean having a...
To get people back in Calcasieu
For
Parish
housing?
to their near their homes so that they can rebuild.
Yeah, I can say from the parish who I work for,
Yeah.
and I believe it is in alignment with FEMA, the preference is to have that, meaning the more people who can have they call it MHU, mobile housing unit, at or near their residence, that's the first preference. And so that is everybody's goal. And so the more people that have that option, the better. And I think Liz pointed out there's already 92 that have so far, and there'll be more, expressed that preference. So yes, that's what everybody would prefer first. But of course, it's a multiple option answer. Not everybody is going to be in that situation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jerry or Liz on the housing?
The only thing I was concerned about or thinking about is that obviously we're still having difficulty with, phone calls and the web and that sort of thing. Is there anything that people should do if they miss a call or if they don't hear from FEMA and they think they should be hearing from FEMA?
Why don't I let Jerry answer that?
Yeah, again, I just encourage all households to make sure their contact information is current and up to date. And again, the FEMA helpline, 800-621-3362, is a great, that's the way you can kind of stay in contact, right? That's the best approach right now. But we are, again, very early in the call-out process. The numbers that Liz gave you, again, indicates that, right? That the need right now, the numbers in terms of the number of people that are registered is certainly a big discrepancy there. So that's why I think we need a little more time before we can really identify what the trends are for Calcasieu Parish. Okay.
Let me just add a couple of comments on the housing topic. Again, we'll say it probably a few times, but these are all individual cases that are directly between the resident and FEMA. It's case management in that sense. So any of the arrangements at any particular home or in a commercial RV park or somewhere else, it's not the local government or the state directly involved. However, as I think Ruby pointed out and Jerry, this is a very important partnership. So what is the role of local government, meaning the parish and the cities in this? It's an important one in that we need to help clear the path, make it as easy as possible for these residents to do this. In a normal situation, for example, you can't place an RV or a mobile home in your front or backyard right next to your, let's say it's a single family home. Zoning wouldn't require it. Well, through executive orders or ordinance changes, we are temporarily, in the police jury, waiving those zoning requirements in that case. Another example is waiving of permit fees. Some of the time is not the fact that these MHUs or trailers might be available, it's the coordination and all the hookups, and there's paperwork and other things to get that unit to a residence. We don't want to make it any longer for people to have a lot of things we would normally have to do. I think that's a very positive thing that the parish is doing and the city of Lake Charles, and through joint service agreements we have with the smaller municipalities, the same thing. So everybody's got a role to make this the easiest, smoothest possible for people who have had a lot of adverse things happen to them. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. And we know there are questions. FEMA has committed to communicate very frequently and be very transparent about the progress in these as this begins. But at this time, that's what he has told us, Jerry, that they don't have an exact date, and it's going to differ for every person. But it certainly sounds like they're a lot closer, and so we feel good about that so far. That was the only thing I had on the housing. I know Mayor Hunter is going to speak in a moment from the city, and he may want to get into more detail. Is there any other questions on the housing topic for now?
I don't have an RV, so I don't know exactly how it works as far as getting electricity to them and that sort of thing. But I was just wondering, are people going to find themselves in a situation where they have to have power at two different locations? And if so, have you heard anything about, utility assistance so that somebody doesn't have to pay two electric bills? Because I know leaving your electricity on in your home that is not livable will help you as far as, getting it livable and perhaps reducing, the mold and the additional damage and that sort of thing.
Jerry, let me try to answer some of that. If I'm wrong, correct me. My understanding, to get it, the mobile unit hooked up, if you will, for electricity is part of the price that's covered in the FEMA assistance. I do not know, and if somebody else here does, please come up, if that applies to any monthly cost or cost related to the permanent home. I honestly don't know that, and if Liz, you want to address that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So, or yes, ma'am, I should say. So, bottom line is, if we can put a survivor on their private site, that's obviously our preference. It will add, as you said, because we're going to basically plug into their existing utility, so there will be that potential increase in the cost. Usually what we find in most disasters is because they're not living in the damaged dwelling, that utility bill itself is going down, and so there's kind of a leveling off between the two. But yes, it would feed off of that. Quite often we find commercial parks that, for RVs in particular, that the cost of utilities is part of the pad price that we pay, so there's no additional utility cost for the survivor. So there are survivors that we go, we kind of work with them, because if they don't have the financial ability to pay for additional utilities in a mobile home park that would come with that option, or even at their own residence, then it may be financially better for them to go into a travel trailer that has the utilities included. So that's why we continue to say we really do work very closely with the survivor to try to find the best fit for them whenever we possibly can, and offer that. And I will just give one tiny follow-up to something I think you also asked earlier about if we're unable to reach them. We will continue trying, and we try different times of the day and then try to move to different days. One challenge that Mr. Stoller mentioned, though, is some people have their phone lines are disconnected already. So as soon as they get a number back, if it's not the same number, we definitely need that update.
I mean, so is there a window of time that they should expect to be contacted within? And so, for example, if they haven't heard from FEMA in, 30 days, they better realize that somehow they've fallen through the cracks, or what?
I would say that if a survivor hasn't heard and they're not sure why they haven't heard, and they believe that their situation warrants attention, it doesn't matter to me what they believe it's warranted for. If 7 to 10 days have gone by and they haven't heard anything, my recommendation is always to call the helpline and find out what's going on, because it may be, quite often, we are waiting on something from the survivor, some sort of documentation, and they haven't realized in the letters or whatever that we're waiting on them. So it's always a good idea, especially at this point in the recovery, don't let too much time go by. We have survivors who will call us daily. I don't necessarily encourage that. But if they haven't heard anything at all, 7 to 10 days, and they do have needs, I highly recommend calling. Yes.
Thank you, Liz. This is very helpful. Certainly, we'll continue to communicate through public briefing and other ways any developments regarding the direct housing program. And we appreciate the state and FEMA covering that today and making it more public with some more detail. We do want to hear from a couple of our elected officials to wrap up the briefing. We'll start with Police Jury President Tony Gilry.
Thank you, Brian. And just like Ms. Leah said, that my mother is living with her sister, and she has threatened me already to come get her tomorrow. So I know about that. I just want to say too, we didn't get the rain that we was expected, but we're still asking everybody to still be safe. And I want to give thanks to so many people, and I don't want to start calling out names and groups because I'm going to miss everybody for where we're at today. I would have never thought we'd have been here, but there are so many people I want to say thank you to for being here. Everyone that's worked so hard, a lot of long hours, little sleep. Anyone, because I will miss someone, I definitely send all my heart out and everything, but thanks to everyone. And we're still a long way to go, but Calcasieu, we will get there. And as I say, may God bless everyone and be safe. Ciao.
Okay, thank you, Tony. We'll next hear from Mayor Nick Hunter of Lake Charles.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. We are about a month post-event, and the time is certainly now for the discussion and conversation, especially when it comes to housing, to end, and the plan to be advertised and eventually implemented. And that's why I'm very happy to see a lot of the communication and conversation today from FEMA and our state and federal counterparts. A couple things I also want to reiterate. Since Laura hit, no one has been kicked out of a hotel room provided by FEMA. That is very important to me. It's very important to locals, and it's certainly important to those individuals utilizing those resources. And that will continue. I do not want people to think that though this housing plan was announced today and though we realize it may take some time to implement, we are committed to make sure that people are not thrown out of hotel rooms before the full implementation of this plan. I can guarantee you that FEMA has heard that message loud and clear from locals. The city and the parish are working together on crafting this ordinance that will allow this FEMA plan to be implemented. And the last thing that we want and last thing that we're going to allow is local red tape or local issues to lengthen the timeline for someone to access that resource from FEMA. We're going to work hand in hand with our state and federal counterparts to make sure that these resources, these housing options are implemented as quickly as possible. We need our people home. We've said that several times, and I think that question was asked a moment ago. I will be very direct. We absolutely want our population home. We are a family here in Southwest Louisiana. We want our family members home at the right time, and part of that is housing, and we realize that. There's a lot of people that I know would be home today if they had a home to come home to. And that's another thing that we all have to remember, both on a national and a local level, is there's a lot of individuals here in Calcasieu Parish in Southwest Louisiana who are still picking up the pieces and who do not have a home to come home to. And when this plan is implemented through FEMA and the state, the most important thing is that this is a housing option that people can have some pride in. And we demand that. We demand that for our citizens. And I believe FEMA has heard that. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all, and I was actually very encouraged to hear the amount of questions that goes into the case management part of making sure that we don't have a cookie-cutter approach to every citizen, and I appreciate that. And so that's what we want. We want a plan that has options for our citizens, but most importantly, we want options that people can have some pride in. Because residents here in Calcasieu Parish, we're great Louisiana citizens, we're also great American citizens. And again, those comments have been heard and voiced loud and clear to our federal counterparts. Just a further explanation of how we are working with FEMA. We'll be waiving fees for the city of Lake Charles. I believe the parish is also doing that as well. And expediting the permitting process. Again, we want to eliminate the red tape to make sure that no one is able to say that local government was the reason that something was delayed. We're not going to allow that to happen. Locals have expectations. Our citizens demand a certain quality of response from local government, and they also expect the same from the federal government. And local leadership realizes that, and we have those same expectations. Thank you. That's the end of my comments, unless there are any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor. That concludes our briefing for today. We do have a briefing scheduled for Friday, September 25th, but time is yet to be determined. It may be earlier in the day. We will try to get out information to that at some point tomorrow. But for now, that will conclude our briefing for today. We appreciate everybody participating.